The quiet crisis no one talks about. Have you ever walked into a room and suddenly stopped, confused, asking yourself why you went there in the first place? Have you ever met someone new, smiled, shook hands, listened carefully, and forgotten their name just minutes later? Or spent hours studying, highlighting lines, watching videos, only to feel your mind go completely blank when it actually mattered? Most people laugh these moments off. They say things like, "My memory is terrible," or "I'm just not good at remembering things." But deep down, something more painful is happening. You begin to lose trust in your own mind. You stop believing in your ability to learn, to focus, to grow. You start thinking that intelligence is something you either have or you don't. And slowly, without realizing it, you lower your expectations of yourself. But what if the problem was never your memory? What if nothing is broken inside your brain? What if you were simply never taught how memory actually works? This is not a video about shortcuts or quick tricks. This is not about memorizing faster for one exam and then forgetting everything again. This is a journey into how your mind truly stores information, why it forgets, what it chooses to keep, and how you can finally take control of that process. By the end of this journey, you won't just remember more, you'll understand why you remember. And once you understand that, something powerful happens. You stop fighting your brain, and you start working with it. Let's begin at the root of the problem. The myth of bad memory. Most people carry a silent belief they never question. They believe memory is a talent. They believe some people are born with sharp minds, while others are simply unlucky. They believe forgetting is proof of weakness, and every time their mind goes blank, that belief grows stronger. But this belief is wrong. Not because you're special, not because you're different, but because memory does not work the way you were taught to think it does. To understand this, imagine something simple. Imagine your mind is not a muscle that gets tired easily. Imagine it is a storage system. Every day, information flows into it. Names, faces, words, facts, sounds, emotions. Some of it stays. Most of it disappears. And the reason things disappear is not because your brain is weak. It's because they were never stored properly. Think of your memory like a library. Every new piece of information is a book arriving at the door. But if those books are thrown onto the floor, without order, without labels, without returning to them, they don't become part of the library. They become noise. Your brain works the same way. Information first enters a temporary space, a holding area. It stays there briefly, waiting for instructions. If nothing happens, it fades. This is short-term memory. Long-term memory is different. It's not temporary. It's structured. It's organized. But information does not move there automatically. And this is where most people fail without even realizing it. They listen, but they don't process. They read, but they don't engage. They hear, but they don't connect. So the brain makes a decision. This doesn't matter. And it lets it go. That's why you can hear a name and lose it within minutes. That's why you can read a page and remember nothing from it the next day. That's why cramming feels productive but leaves nothing behind. It's not because you lack intelligence. It's because your system was never trained. Think about this simple moment. You meet someone at a social event. They smile and introduce themselves. You nod politely. The conversation continues. Later, someone asks you their name, and your mind freezes. That name was never saved. It passed through your awareness without leaving a trace. Now imagine the same moment, but slightly different. You hear the name, you pause, you repeat it, you connect it to something familiar, you acknowledge it consciously. Suddenly, the brain receives a message. This is important, and that message changes everything. Memory is not about effort, it's about intention. Your brain is not broken, it is efficient. It deletes what you don't signal as meaningful. It keeps what you treat with care. So the real problem is not forgetting. The real problem is that most people never build a system that tells the brain what deserves to stay. And once you understand this, something shifts. You stop blaming yourself. You stop calling yourself forgetful. You stop feeling ashamed of your mind. You realize that memory is not a gift given to a few. It is a skill. And like any skill, it can be trained, step by step, with clarity and with control. This is where real change begins. In the next stage, we'll uncover the single gate your memory must pass through, the one factor that decides if anything is remembered at all. And without it, no technique will ever work.
Attention! The door memory cannot enter without. Before anything can be remembered, something far more basic must happen. Your mind must be present. This may sound obvious, but it is the most ignored truth about memory. You cannot remember what you never truly noticed. Most people believe forgetting happens after learning. In reality, forgetting happens before memory even begins. Every second of your life, your brain is flooded with information. Sounds overlap, images compete, thoughts interrupt each other, notifications demand attention, voices fade in and out. If your brain tried to save everything, it would collapse under the weight. So it does something intelligent. It filters, and the filter it uses is attention. What you focus on gets a chance to stay. What you don't focus on is quietly erased. This is not a flaw, it's survival. Think about a moment when your attention failed you. You step out of a car after a long day. Your body moves automatically. Your mind is already somewhere else, planning dinner, checking messages, replaying a conversation. Later, panic hits. You realize something important is missing. You try to remember details. The car, the driver, the license plate. Nothing appears. Not because your memory failed, but because your mind was never truly there. You saw, but you didn't observe. You heard, but you didn't listen. And because attention never opened the door, memory never walked in. This happens everywhere. In classrooms, in meetings, while reading books, while watching videos. People say, "I studied, but I don't remember." What they really mean is, "I was present physically, but absent mentally." Multitasking feels productive, but it is memory's worst enemy. Your brain cannot deeply encode information while constantly switching focus. It hears words, but doesn't assign importance. It receives signals, but never saves them. And so, nothing sticks. Here is the truth most people never accept. You don't have a memory problem, you have an attention problem. And attention is not about effort, it's about intention. When you want to remember something, your brain needs a clear signal, a pause, a moment of focus, a deliberate act of noticing. Even 5 seconds of real attention can change everything. Looking directly, listening fully, repeating silently, acknowledging consciously. Those few seconds tell your brain, this matters. And once that message is delivered, memory has permission to begin. Attention is the gate. If it stays closed, nothing enters. Why your brain refuses to remember words. Once attention opens the door, another problem appears. Your brain still struggles to remember what you give it. And the reason is simple. Your brain does not think in words. It never has. It thinks in images. When you hear a word, your brain immediately translates it into a picture. Not letters, not spelling, a scene. Say the word fire. You don't see the letters F-I-R-E. You see flames, heat, movement, light. This is how memory works. Words alone are empty containers. They are abstract, flat, emotionless. Images are alive. They move, they have color, they create emotion, they leave impressions. And memory follows impressions, not definitions. This is why people struggle with names, vocabulary, formulas, and facts. They try to store them as text. The brain doesn't know what to do with that. But the moment you convert information into a picture, everything changes. Imagine meeting someone new. If you hear their name and do nothing with it, it vanishes. But if your mind creates a visual connection, even a strange or exaggerated one, the brain pays attention. It says, "This is interesting," and interesting things survive. The image doesn't need to be logical. In fact, logic weakens memory. What strengthens memory is uniqueness, movement, emotion, surprise. The more unusual the picture, the deeper it sinks. This is why childhood memories last so long. They were full of color, curiosity, and imagination. As adults, we stop using that system. We replace images with text, stories with lists, experience with information, and memory fades. But the ability never disappears. It waits. Every concept you want to remember can be turned into a visual scene. Every name can be tied to an image. Every idea can become something you see, not just hear. When you do this, your brain stops leaking information. It starts storing it. Memory is not about repetition alone. It is about transformation. You transform words into images, images into experiences, experiences into lasting memory. And once you understand this, learning stops feeling heavy. It becomes vivid, creative, alive. In the next stage, you'll discover why your brain remembers movies better than lists, and how to turn even the most boring information into something unforgettable. Your brain was built for stories, not lists. There is a reason you can remember scenes from movies you watched years ago, but struggle to recall a simple list you read yesterday. Your brain was never designed to store isolated facts. It was designed to follow stories. Stories have direction. They have cause and effect. They have movement. A list is static. Each item stands alone. There is no relationship, no tension, no flow. And without connection, memory has nothing to hold on to. When you try to memorize a list, your brain treats each item as optional. It drops what feels unnecessary and keeps what accidentally stands out. That's why lists fade so quickly. But when information is placed inside a story, something powerful happens. One moment leads naturally to the next. Each image triggers another. Memory stops being forced and starts becoming automatic. A story turns information into a journey. This is how children remember fairy tales word for word. This is how actors remember entire scripts. This is how ancient cultures passed knowledge without writing anything down. They didn't memorize, they told stories. The brain doesn't ask what comes next, it expects it. When you create a narrative, even a strange or unrealistic one, your brain relaxes. It recognizes the pattern, and patterns are easy to remember. The story doesn't need to make sense in the real world. It only needs to make sense to your imagination. In fact, the more dramatic, exaggerated, or playful it is, the stronger the memory becomes. Because surprise wakes the brain up. Suddenly, facts stop floating. They become connected scenes. Once information is connected, forgetting becomes difficult. This is not a trick. It's how memory has always worked. When you stop trying to store information as fragments and start linking it as a sequence, your mind begins to cooperate. And once your brain learns that learning can feel like storytelling, it stops resisting. Why learning once is the fastest way to forget. Many people believe that memory fails because they are careless. In reality, memory fails because they expect permanence from a single encounter.
Your brain does not work that way. When you learn something once, your brain treats it as temporary. It assumes it might not be needed again, so it lets it fade. This is not a weakness, it's efficiency. Your brain protects itself from overload by letting go of anything that does not return. This is why cramming feels productive but leaves nothing behind. You push information in, force it to stay for a short time, and then release it. The brain learns the wrong lesson. It learns that the information was only important for a moment. True memory is built through spacing, through distance, through return. When something comes back again and again over time, the brain notices. It starts to ask a different question. Why does this keep coming back? And once that question is asked, the brain begins to save it deeper. Each return strengthens the path. Each review reinforces the signal. The space between repetitions is what matters. Not constant repetition, not obsession, but timing. When you revisit information after it begins to fade, you interrupt forgetting. You turn fragile memory into something solid. Over time, memory stops being fragile. It becomes stable. What was once difficult to recall becomes effortless. Not because you tried harder, but because you allowed your brain to work naturally. This is how lasting learning is built. Not in one intense moment, but through repeated gentle reminders. Memory is not formed by pressure. It is formed by patience. And when you respect that rhythm, your brain rewards you with something rare: reliability.
Emotion, the force that makes memory permanent. There is one factor that decides whether a memory fades or stays with you for a lifetime: emotion. Your brain does not store moments equally. It ranks them. And the ranking system is not logic. It is feeling. Think about your own life. You probably don't remember what you ate on an ordinary day last month, but you remember the moment you were deeply hurt, the moment you felt proud, the moment something changed you. Those memories didn't survive because you tried to remember them. They survived because your brain marked them as important. Emotion sends a powerful message to the mind: do not erase this. When emotion is present, your brain switches into preservation mode. It strengthens connections. It deepens pathways. Information without emotion is treated as replaceable. Information with emotion is protected. This is why people struggle to remember dates, definitions, and facts. They learn them in isolation, stripped of meaning. But the moment a fact becomes human, memory awakens. A number becomes a story. A word becomes an experience. A concept becomes personal. Emotion does not have to be extreme. It only needs to be real. Curiosity, surprise, sadness, joy, even mild discomfort. Anything that makes your brain pause and react. If something makes you feel, it makes you remember. And if a subject feels distant or boring, you can still create emotion. You can connect it to your own life. You can imagine consequences. You can exaggerate meaning. The brain does not judge emotion. It only responds to it. Once information is emotionally charged, it stops feeling foreign. It becomes yours. This is the difference between knowing something briefly and carrying it with you forever. Teaching, when memory becomes unbreakable. There is a moment when learning transforms. A moment when information stops being something you received and becomes something you own. That moment is when you teach it. Teaching forces your brain to change roles. You are no longer a passive receiver. You become an organizer, a translator, a creator. And that shift activates memory at its deepest level.
To teach something, even in the simplest way, your brain must retrieve it without help. It must structure it clearly. It must express it in your own language. This process rebuilds the knowledge from the inside. Anything you can rebuild, you cannot easily forget. Teaching does not require an audience. It requires intention. You can explain a concept to a friend, speak it out loud to yourself, write it as if you were helping someone else understand. The brain does not care who listens. It cares that you produce the knowledge. When you do this, memory is reinforced instantly. What was once fragile becomes stable. What was once vague becomes clear. Teaching is not repetition. It is confirmation. It proves to your brain that the information matters. And once your brain accepts that, it protects it. This is why the deepest understanding comes from sharing. This is why those who explain often learn faster than those who only listen. When you teach, you remember twice. Once when you learn, and again when you express. In the next stage, you'll discover how to store entire systems of information inside places your brain already knows, and why location is one of memory's most powerful anchors.
The inner architecture of memory. Your brain has an unusual strength that most people never use. It remembers places effortlessly. You may forget a phone number you learned yesterday, but you can still remember the layout of a home you lived in years ago. You remember where the door was, where the light came in, how the room felt. This is not accidental. Spatial memory is one of the oldest and strongest systems in the human mind. Long before writing existed, people stored knowledge in locations. They attached information to paths, rooms, landmarks. Your brain still works that way. When information floats without structure, it fades. When information is placed inside a space, it settles. This is where the idea of building an inner structure begins. You choose a place you know deeply, somewhere familiar, somewhere you can walk through without effort. Then, instead of trying to remember information directly, you place it there, not as words, but as scenes. Each location becomes a container. Each image becomes a marker. When you later walk through that space in your mind, the information reveals itself naturally. You are not forcing recall. You are exploring. This method works because it aligns with how your brain evolved. Memory stops being abstract and becomes physical. You are no longer chasing information. You are visiting it. And once knowledge has a location, it becomes difficult to lose. This is not imagination for imagination's sake. It is organization at the deepest level. Your mind becomes a structured space, not a chaotic stream. The moment your brain decides what stays. There is a hidden window each day when your brain makes its most important decisions. It happens quietly, without effort, while you sleep. When night arrives, your brain does not shut down. It sorts. It reviews the day. It strengthens some connections. It weakens others. And the information it touches last often becomes the information it keeps. This is why the final moments before sleep matter so much. Your brain treats recent inputs as priority. If your last input is noise, your brain saves noise. If your last input is meaningful, your brain protects meaning. This is not about studying for hours before bed. It is about intention. A few minutes of review, a gentle reminder, a quiet moment of focus. Those moments tell your brain this is worth keeping. Sleep then does the rest. Memory consolidates when you rest. Information settles when you stop pushing. What you revisit before sleep
sinks deeper than what you rush through during the day. This is why small nightly rituals are powerful. They work with your brain, not against it. You don't need more time. You need better timing. And when you respect that timing, your brain responds with clarity. In the next stage, you'll discover the simplest action that turns information into something solid, and why writing changes memory in a way nothing else can.
Writing, when thought becomes solid. There is a reason certain ideas disappear the moment you hear them, while others stay with you for years. The difference is not intelligence. The difference is whether the idea ever became physical. When information stays only in your head, it is unstable. It floats. It competes with everything else. But the moment you write something down, the relationship changes. Writing slows your mind. It forces clarity. It turns vague thoughts into defined shapes. Your brain interprets this as commitment. When you write, you are not just copying information, you're processing it. You are deciding what matters and how it fits. This act activates multiple parts of the brain at once: thinking, movement, perception. The more systems involved, the stronger the memory. Writing is not about perfection, it is about presence. A sentence written in your own words carries more power than a page you only read. When you write, information stops being external. It becomes internal, especially when writing is personal. When you add a note, an example, a reflection, you attach meaning, and meaning creates memory. This is why handwritten notes leave a deeper trace than passive reading. Your hand moves slower than your eyes, and that slowness gives your brain time to absorb. Writing is not an old habit. It is a biological shortcut to understanding. When you write something down, your brain hears a clear signal. Save this. Active recall, the moment you face your memory. Most people mistake familiarity for mastery. They read something again and again and feel confident because it looks familiar. But familiarity is deceptive. True memory reveals itself only when the information is gone and you try to bring it back. This is where active recall begins. Active recall is not comfortable. It exposes gaps. It reveals uncertainty. But that discomfort is not failure. It is growth. When you close the book, when you pause the video, when you ask yourself, can I explain this without help? Your brain is forced to work. And when your brain works to retrieve information, the memory strengthens. The silent enemy of memory, mental overload. There is one reason many people feel their memory is getting worse with time. Not age, not intelligence, not lack of effort. The real enemy is overload. Your brain was never designed to carry everything. It was designed to protect what matters. But modern life floods it constantly. From the moment you wake up, information pours in. Messages, notifications, videos, opinions, noise. Your brain barely has time to breathe before it is asked to store more. And when everything demands attention, nothing feels important. Memory needs space. Without space, information has nowhere to land. Think of your mind as a room. If the room is filled wall to wall with random objects, nothing stands out. Nothing is easy to find. That is what mental overload does. Important thoughts get buried. Simple intentions disappear. Clarity fades. People blame their memory, but the truth is their mind is exhausted. Overload teaches the brain a dangerous habit. Ignore.
discard, move on. And once the brain learns that habit, even valuable information struggles to survive. To protect your memory, you must protect your mind. This does not mean rejecting the world. It means choosing carefully. Not every message deserves attention. Not every piece of content deserves space. Not every thought deserves to stay. When you reduce noise, memory returns. When you create silence, clarity grows. Your brain performs best when it is respected, not overwhelmed. Memory is not about adding more. It is about removing what does not belong. Every attempt to recall is a signal. It tells the brain that this information is valuable enough to be accessed again. Even if you struggle, even if you remember only fragments, the act itself builds stronger connections. This is why rereading feels easy but changes little, while recalling feels hard but changes everything. Memory is built during effort, not comfort. The more often you pull information out, the easier it becomes to access. Eventually, recall stops being work. It becomes instinct. This is the difference between knowing something briefly and owning it completely. Active recall turns learning into a dialogue with your mind. You ask, your brain answers, and with each exchange, memory grows stronger. In the final stage, we will confront the hidden force that quietly destroys memory every day and learn how to protect your mind so that what you learn can finally stay.
Becoming someone who remembers what matters. You now understand something most people never learn. Memory is not magic. It is not luck. It is not a gift reserved for a few. It is the result of daily choices. How you pay attention, how you connect meaning, how you repeat with intention, how you create emotion, how you teach, recall, write, and protect your mind. Each step builds on the last. Together, they form a system. And when you live by that system, memory stops feeling fragile. You stop second-guessing yourself. You stop fearing forgetting. You stop doubting your ability to learn. You begin to trust your mind again. This journey was never just about remembering facts or words. It was about reclaiming control. When you remember what matters, you think more clearly. You speak with confidence. You learn faster. You live with intention. Knowledge stops slipping away. It becomes part of who you are. And here is the most important truth of all. Knowing these steps changes nothing. Using them changes everything. Memory is not built in moments of motivation. It is built in small, consistent actions. The pause before distraction, the review before sleep, the sentence written down, the question asked without looking at the answer. These choices shape your mind. You do not need to be perfect. You only need to be consistent. When you do, your brain responds. It becomes sharper, calmer, more reliable. And one day, without realizing it, you notice something powerful. You are no longer someone who forgets easily. You are someone who remembers what matters. And that changes everything.